Morning, everybody. We'll just be getting started very shortly. Okay. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Hopefully, everybody can hear me this morning. So, thank you very much for joining us. First of all, please try and ignore my busy background. Unfortunately, my house is it's a busy house. But I want to welcome you all to this call, which is hopefully the first in a series of calls focusing on 5G security. And this one is very much in partnership with Scotland 5G Centre, ScotlandIS, and the Scottish Government Cyber Resilience team as well. So we're going to have 4 speakers today. First up, we're going to have Paul Coffey, CEO of Scotland 5G Centre. Then we'll have Greg Paul from Strathclyde University, and also very strongly involved in the Scotland 5G Centre as well. I'll be coming back to speak then around the cyber cluster and how we want to connect that into the 5G work that's happening. And then Keith McDevitt will follow up with the focus on why the Scotland government is interested in this area and how they're also getting involved. So we'll take Q&A at the end. Please do raise your questions throughout using the Q&A function. So if there's any that's particularly pertinent to a particular speaker, we may make an exception and take it on after that talk. But generally, we'll keep the Q&A to the end so we can have it as a panel discussion. And also, we will, if people feel like there is something they want to talk about rather than just ask a simple question, we will let people, we will unmute people as well. So just raise your hand at the end and let us know, what it is you'd like to bring up in the call. So we've scheduled it for an hour and a half. We will probably be aiming for around about the hour, but we wanted to make sure that we left lots of time for questions in case there are, and hopefully there will be many questions along the way. But in terms of speaking, we should be done in around about 40 to 50 minutes with questions then. So I think that's probably enough for me to begin with. I'm going to hand over to Paul Coffey now to start the first presentation.
Okay, can you hear me? I don't know how I confirm that.
Yeah, I can hear you, Paul.
Yeah,
so
super, thank you. Sorry, I was double unmute. Right, good morning. Sorry for the slight delay there. So, yeah, I'm quite new into the role. So I took over the role of the CEO for the Scotland 5G Centre. This is week 4. So it's been interesting times with obviously the backdrop of the pandemic. But it really just does show the importance of connectivity, and I think that's the important thing. And stepping into this role, I'm very, very keen and passionate. I always have been, obviously, about telecoms, and my background is from a mobile operator perspective, and coming from an industry-led, I guess, organisation. There's a lot I can bring into the Scotland 5G Centre. So yeah, with the backdrop of the challenges we're having, but it really does demonstrate a lot of creativity and an enablement for new technologies, and with 5G, is live and operational now, and introducing some new use cases and how we can embrace that around remote working and health and advanced manufacturing, etc., is really exciting. So I'm really pleased to be invited to speak on this, because I think as we move towards realization of digital realization, it's never been more paramount of importance that the security of our networks. So, okay. So I've got to say 10 minutes or so just to introduce the vision and what the 5G Centre is there to do, really. So it was put in place in October last year. And then I've come in really to take a step change and accelerate it really. So it's a national centre. That's the first and most really important element to it. It's to my knowledge the only national 5G centre out there. And there's obviously a number of other centres, but it's the national element that's unique. And the Scotland obviously has some challenging connectivity issues to overcome, but with that and the national element and the national scale is quite unique. So we're really there to accelerate the adoption of 5G across the country, but also help raise that profile across the industry, both within UK and internationally as well. And what we hope to do is transport some of these the use cases and successes that we create from Scotland elsewhere around the globe. Because we do, strongly feel, especially now, it's a new norm we're going to be heading into, and the realization of economic and society potential of 5G, and the connectivity we can achieve from that is going to be interesting to see. But the centre is really there at the focal point and the catalyst to drive that change. So in terms of where we are now with Scotland, it's moving ahead in terms of, in the last 12 months or so, has made some good strides forward in terms of its fixed connectivity. So there's a focus program on there, and we've got super fast now to 92%. And there's around the mobile connectivity challenge. It is still a challenge, and there's a number of new initiatives. There's a specific program in Scotland, a 4G infill program, which is occurring, and then there's the shared rural network piece. But as you can see from those statistics there, it's the MNOs have struggled to deploy connectivity into Scotland. With just 42% of MNOs creating coverage there, and 80% for one MNO. So that's 4G, and that's 4 years since 4G launched, and here we are, the onset of 5G. It is going to be a challenge. So what the centres there, and I'll go into more detail about some of the live projects we've got going, and some of my vision of how we can accelerate and do more, go beyond what we're doing now to encourage infrastructure deployment and really embrace new technologies and new business models. Because I think we are going to see a new wave coming ahead soon with new technology, with O-RAN and technology such like that. We're going to start to see new business models and perhaps new players in the marketplace. So really, Scotland is a test bed for these new business models to become commercial. What I'm keen is to ensure that Scotland is not just another test bed, another R&D. It's really a sandpit for sustainability. So it's to test new business models and they need to become commercial. Okay. So what is the potential for Scotland? So this is an extract from a report that was published end of last year. Deloitte, the Scotland's digital potential. So really, this speaks volumes. What it's saying is a potential increase in £17 billion by 2035 if we can get this right. That is absolutely huge. 160,000 jobs, 3,000 new businesses. I think over 1/3 people live in rural Scotland. It gives them choices. If we can get connectivity out to them, and then can demonstrate what we are called the 5G centre, but starting from where we are today, the initial challenge is connectivity. We need to get the connectivity right, and then build on top of that with 5G. And then I'll come on a bit later to talk about the use cases and how we can work with entrepreneurs around that. But the potential for Scotland is huge, and this is what excites me. If we get this right, and the size of Scotland, if we can attract the inward investment, we will deliver on this, and then we will export that as a product to education other countries with similar challenges. So, just to talk in a little more detail, it's obviously a Scottish focus for the centre, but I'm keen. We need to attract interest from not just Scotland and the Scottish businesses. It's from an industry perspective that needs to be global. We need to promote the work we're doing. So there's three I want to talk about. We've got 3 Wave 1 projects, and that various other that they're associated directly with the centre. And then we've got other projects that the centre's involved with as well. So the centre's there to be a front door for 5G for Scotland. It's that focal point. Any 5G related projects, we're there to help promote, to help lead, and also to help bring ecosystems or consortiums together. There's a number of 5G projects ongoing that we're directly involved in, where we're working with a number of players to bring them together to really see if we can get another couple of projects off the ground around the 5G Create initiative. Knowledge exchange, another key part of this. So we need to be going out there talking about 5G and what it means. So I said the centre's there, and we've got 4G connectivity challenges there, and we've got over and above 5G. So connectivity is the fabric of Scotland or anywhere, to be honest. But once we've got that, it's what do we do with it? And I'm really passionate that we bring together, and I'm looking to deliver some digital innovation hubs around the country, then be rural in the top towns and cities, where we can bring people in and talk to them about 5G. Because 5G is, apologies of the operators on the call, but if 5G has been commercially launched today, isn't really the 5G product that the marketeers talk about. It's not AI, it's not low latency. That will come in a couple of years. But what the centre's keen to do, and what I'm passionate to do, is we get some innovation hubs out there where we can bring entrepreneurs, we can bring SMEs in, and they've got a safe environment to test and productize 5G before it goes commercial to them. So we can give them access to a 5G ecosystem where they can develop their products and services and truly to deliver that capability. So once 5G is a commercial service, once we get that connectivity out to them, they're there ready to go. So if we can bring businesses together in that way, that's hugely powerful, and that will help deliver on that promise of the Deloitte and realise that. So it's about knowledge exchange, promotion, having a presence in the industry. We're already making good steps and good strides towards that in terms of being recognised as a national centre for Scotland. And it's about the capacity and capability. So having the services, having the reach, and being there as a focal point. So if anyone has any questions, from the industry, from Scotland, we can help and put them in contact with the right businesses or stakeholder groups. So these are our Wave 1 projects. We've got 3 official Wave 1 projects associated with the centre. So I think I may have passed over, but the centre is a collaboration between the Scottish Futures Trust, the University of Strathclyde, and the University of Glasgow. So these WAVE projects are all as a result of that collaboration and the inward investment. So we've got rural connectivity, and we've got urban innovation districts, and we've got asset management. So I'll just go on briefly to talk a little bit about these. So firstly, the rural one. This is I guess a second phase of this rural challenge led by University of Strathclyde. So the first phase for this was 5G Rural First, which was up at the Orkney Islands. And this project has got a two centre. It's still in the Orkney Islands, and there's a second element of it around Loch Lomond. And it's about utilising shared spectrum. So this is going above and looking at very different delivery models and business models. It's looking at shared spectrum and local licensed spectrum. So some of this, the new spectrum that Ofcom recently made available. All this is very useful for private networks and potential rural pop-up networks. So there'll be a shared element and a local license element, and that's going to explore various use cases that you can see on the on this slide. We'll also look at the business model around it as well. Objective and the outcome of this is we get a sustainable deployment scenario, one that be a cookie cutter where we can cut and paste and replicate, and that's really important. I'm sure we've all seen various trials of various natures in rural before, but largely they fail on the commercialization front due to kind of OpEx costs and such like. The objective of this is to find a model that works. And it's not a one solution fits all. So there can be various different elements to this, and it will look at different, I guess, deployment densities. But I'm really excited about this to see how we can bring a connectivity, but also how that can be sustainable going forward, because that's the really important thing. Whilst this is looking at some new technology, it's more the business model aspect of this that is the real uniqueness element to it, and how that can enhance agriculture and onshore, offshore, etc. So all those different use cases, but bringing in 5G into those environments. Okay. Second of our projects is the Urban Innovation District. So this is centred in Glasgow, supported by University of Glasgow. And this is looking obviously a bit more at the urban aspects. What are the challenges in deployment? Looking at small cells, as we a lot of 5G infrastructure getting deployed today. And the third of our project is about accelerating that. But this is about small cells, and they carry some unique challenges. How do we deploy small cells in urban centres? What is the mix between indoor and outdoor? They're going to implement SON, so organising networks on top of that, and then build up various use cases on top around health, environment, and do some kind of CCTV, kind of active intelligent monitoring as well. So this will evolve, and I'm keen, again, this has some strong outcomes that we can drive into our third project here, which is the the Infrastructure Deployment Accelerator. So this is led by one of our founding partners, the Scottish Futures Trust. It's really the foundation of some of the fundamentals of 5G rollout. It's looking at how do we work with the industry to accelerate infrastructure deployment. So looking at the code, electrical communications code, how do we roll that out? How do we work with landlords? How do we look at way leaves? All those kind of, that noisy stuff that slows down infrastructure deployment. How do we get the power in the right place? How do we ensure the backhaul is in the right place? So it's really developing a best practice that this project will then roll out across the towns and cities of Scotland, with a view to attracting and making it more attractive to the mobile operator environments to roll out and take away some of those pain points that they may have today. So it's about standardization, which ironically 25 years in, and we still don't have a standard, and this still causes a bit of a problem. But I'm keen for this, because this is almost step one. This is your fundamentals. Get this right, and the rest will follow. And if we're struggling now, when we look at small cells in dense urban areas, and we're potentially putting small cells on every lamppost or every other lamppost, these things we need to find a way to make it work. Otherwise, one, operators just won't roll out, or two, it'll be it'll become too costly and too much of a burden. So, the activities at the moment, the centre's really going to start promoting itself now. We have the Wave 1 projects underway, and there's a number of other initiatives around the country that you will very soon see the centre promoting and leading. A number of showcases will be coming out later this year as well. We'll be talking about those, and there'll be an official launch coming soon of the centre in September timeframe as well. So to summarise, the Scotland 5G Centre is there to deliver economic and societal change for Scotland, and it's about the acceleration of infrastructure deployment and bringing together entrepreneurs and businesses so they can recognise and acknowledge where 5G can make a material impact on their lives and businesses. So we're forging away, building on existing relationships and looking to attract inward investment to accelerate that even further. So yeah, thank you for your time. If you want to get in touch to understand how you can work with the centre, I'll be really keen to assist in those conversations going forward. Thank you.
Thanks, Paul. So I think we'll go straight into Greg now, and then we'll take questions at the end, if that's okay.
Sure. Okay, so security and 5G, I was going to give a little kind of brief overview of how we've got here, where here is, where we actually are now, and what's going to be happening in the future. So why am I here, what am I doing? So I head up mobile networks and cybersecurity at Strathclyde. I've done a lot of stuff in the industry before, I kind of skipped through that, did a lot of advanced voice, 4G rollouts in the US in the late stage, fair bit of spectrum policy, spectrum sharing, and dynamic spectrum access, and other ways to get access to the spectrum you need so that spectrum is no longer a blocker. Did a fair bit of that with Rural First as well. Cybersecurity, done a lot on CNI and the banking side of things, and penetration testing and stuff, and end-to-end private mobile network builds and stuff like that. I'm also a member of the UK 5G security group, so this security is a big priority for the UK as well. So this is a bigger stage when we start to look internationally. In terms of 5G today in Scotland, Paul has given a little bit of an intro, but I would pose the question: 5G, wherefore art thou 5G? Here's a map of 5G in the UK. You'll notice I was able to very conveniently and inappropriately crop off quite a large part of the country because there wasn't much on it. So basically north of Glasgow, there's not much. I think one network has got a little bit of 5G in Dice, but I mean, it looks like a single cell, it looks like a small cell at that. That there is what we call a problem and an opportunity. That is actually a coverage map. And that's unfortunate because it shows that we have a long way to go with 5G, but equally it means that security can be an enabler for us to go about doing it, and we can get it right because we've got the opportunity, because we haven't built it, we haven't deployed it, we haven't rolled it out yet, we haven't made any mistakes yet, so we can get this right because it's still early days. Today's 5G is early 5G. It's basically 4G. It's the 4G network core with some 5G radios piggybacked onto the top of existing 4G radios. Non-standalone mode is what we call this, and that's all fine. By about 2022, 2023, depending on the impact COVID is going to have on some of the suppliers, we'll be seeing what we would start to call true 5G kicking in. That's where we've got standalone radios. We're no longer piggybacking onto the 4G core. We're running the 5G core with all the things that entails, and we're starting to see the 5G services and benefits become available. And what that means is it's going to start to look towards industrial IoT. And the thing we've got to remember with industrial IoT is, well, that means we're starting to put really quite important sensitive things onto the internet, onto our 5G networks. And at that point, we have to really get this right. We have to secure this. This starts to get quite serious. I've put the inevitable triangle that everyone talks about, the triangle of the use cases. Enhanced mobile broadband is sort of what we're looking at just now with most people in terms of their 5G. This is what you're seeing with the kind of non-standalone networks just now. We've got massive machine-to-machine communications, I guess you should really say, is this sort of really dense IoT for the vision of everything's connected everywhere all the time. And then you've got the ultra-reliable and low-latency communications. And it is a triangle, although hopefully in the future, the idea with 5G is that the networks will converge and it won't become a game of, well, you can have two, but not the third. But we shall see how that goes. In terms of that, that's the kind of sales version of it on the left there. But actually, the real version of this is the ITU document, which is the minimum, this minimal technical requirements document, and that really describes what 5G is. So moving on from that, we want to talk about security. That's what we're here for today. Security of 5G is a big concern. It's a big priority, and government are taking it very seriously. I think you can certainly look at what they're up to, and it has become a major priority for them recently. This was a consultation, and you can go in, and if you look up Strathclyde, you'll see a consultation response that goes into quite a bit of detail. This is in the news. This is starting to become a headline thing that people are talking about. And the general message seems to have focused 5G security around vendors and politicians as well. It was a bit of a risk putting this up because given the last few days, you never know who's actually going to be your Prime Minister on Thursday, but I seem to have won that battle. So there is much, much, much more to security than vendors. And that's really, really important because everyone gets bogged down in this and then forgets the technical nature of what's actually going on behind the scenes. Vendors and supply chains are important to the overall, the overall ecosystem of security and how secure your network is. But it is really important to remember that you're not just talking about who the vendor is and things like that. It's actually, there's a lot more that we have to get right before we actually have a secure network. And the way we do this is we do this using what's called defense in depth. So in defense in depth, no vendor, even British, American, whoever you want to call them, is going to get security right every time. And they really don't. If you go and look online, you'll see all the security patches that are getting put out every 5 minutes. So let's start with that as our baseline. We need to design our systems to be secure. We have to assume that there will be a failure or a breach, and it's going to happen. It will happen. Let's design our system based on that operating assumption. And as we say with assumptions, right? You've got to really get these right. You've got to think about what you're assuming. You've got to really understand what you're assuming as well. In telecoms, the traditional way of working about security in telecoms is quite interesting. I've worked across both the telecoms and the IT world. There's two different worlds. They are really quite different. Telecoms world is the kind of more old-fashioned approach to security, where we trust everybody that's in our network, and we trust everything that's actually happening and everyone that you're interconnected with. So you make the assumption that you're speaking to state telecom operators, that this is all done at international government negotiated handshake level, and you don't actually really trust or verify anything. You just assume that everybody's honest and legitimate. And I think, as we can sort of see these days, that is just not the case. It's never really been the case. It's been a falsehood that it was the case. In the IT world, we do things a bit different. We trust nobody. We verify everything, and we assume that everyone's trying to cheat, lie, steal, or thieve. And it's a different outlook on things. So, as I say, trusted actors talk to other trusted actors over trusted links. That's the way of working in the telecoms world. But except we've actually realized that with the internet, this doesn't really work. Your packets are getting routed through other people's equipment, and you really can't trust anyone or anything that's part of your network, and you have to start to think about building it. Now, it's quite clear that with 5G, we're certainly moving towards the latter position. And if you want to do this right, what you do is you engineer everything, assuming every linking component is or can be compromised already. Keep your system secure, even if the conduit isn't secure. Just design things assuming that everyone else has conspired against you, in essence. So over the kind of history of mobile, we started with kind of 1G, 2G, and you'll recognize the phones, but we started off much more. 2G was a pure telecom standard. 3G, we started to add a wee bit of internet over the top, but it was still a telecom system. 4G is when we started to see a little bit more, packet data came in on 4G. But 5G is where we basically just, it's now just fully, this is a digital data service. This is an internet service. You'll also find it just maybe slightly amusing, as I noticed that we looked at the front of each phone for the first kind of 4 generations, and immediately when we got to the 5th generation, we started to look at the back of the phone for some reason. Apparently, we're more interested in the number of cameras. And anyway, mobile networks are critical to life, the way we know it, to what we do, the way people go about living their life, and how they go and do things. And we look at COVID-19. People are hugely dependent on these networks. We really have to get them secure. And it doesn't take too much looking to see what happens as a risk if you don't get this right. You can look at there was a major O2 outage a couple of years back for about a day or so, when they had some core routing issues and some license issues. Other examples would be when the power went out in London in kind of August last year. Power goes out in London. What happens? All the mobile networks turn off, and then you get all the kind of consequential knock-on of that. Imagine what would happen if we had a kind of serious mobile outage just now during COVID-19. These networks are really important, and we really have to make sure that we get them right. As outages, we see this disruption. We need to design them so we don't have these problems. So how do we secure things? A couple of ways. You can either secure them with lots and lots of paperwork and policies and procedures and things that slow people down and prevent them actually getting any work done, but which make you feel good and give you something to cover yourself with in case something goes wrong. That's the traditional approach. Not hugely effective. Nobody has ever actually prevented a breach through application of pen to paper, so it's important to keep that in mind. The other option is we take things apart, we get inside, we pull the covers off, and we really understand how they work, and we get down into the nitty-gritty and we figure it out. And that really is what it's going to come down to with securing 5G. It's about getting that deep technical understanding across a whole breadth of things in order to understand the whole system, work out how it works, and figure out exactly what's going on in there, and then work out how to improve on that, build that, and how we would break it, and how we'll defend it. And there's always a third option. You could always just fling your hands in the air and seek divine intervention, but that is probably not the route we want to go with to secure our critical national infrastructure. So in conclusion, we had two worlds, the telecoms world and the IT world. What we've started to see today is these two worlds have collided. We're no longer seeing them as two separate worlds. We're really now just seeing telecoms and IT converge, and that is what's become 5G. And with that, I will hand on to Kira, I think.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. That was great. Okay, so I can hopefully share my screen now. Give me 2 seconds. I find my right slide pack. There we go, perfect. Right, I'm getting there. Apologies. Here we go. Now, there we go. Sorry about that. Right, thanks, Paul, and thanks, Greg. That was both very, very interesting. And just a quick reminder for people to share their raise their questions. So we have questions ready to go at the end. That would be really appreciated. So I'm going to speak to you today about the cybersecurity cluster and how we want to make sure that we're bringing cybersecurity and the 5G communities together. And there's a number of reasons why there's a benefit to do that. So in case you haven't come across me before, my role is Head of ScotlandIS Cyber and also the Cluster Manager for Scotland Cyber Cluster. So ScotlandIS, as many people know, are a trade body for the tech industry, but we've also more recently expanded into being a cluster management organisation. And a cluster, in case you're not familiar with the word, is the formal definition is a geographic concentration of businesses, institutions, and suppliers in a particular field. In this case, the field is cybersecurity, and the region is Scotland. And the cluster management organisation helps to bring that coordination role so that we can help the cluster to support, to grow, to develop, and therefore we can grow the cybersecurity sector in Scotland and help to promote it both internally and internationally. So where the kind of some of the history of this is tied into the Scottish Government's strategy, which I know Keith is going to touch on, so I won't cover this in any detail, but just wanted to call out that it's very much tied into the Scottish Government, Scottish enterprise focus and strategy. And really the angle is looking at the eco opportunity that cybersecurity brings. It's a growing area, it's a growing sector. It's worth about 8 billion currently in the UK, and that's grown something like 46% between 2017 2019. And we're seeing more and more companies either enter it, either expanding the portfolio, or brand new companies being set up. And so there's over 1,200 cyber companies throughout the UK now, and 90% of them are SMEs. So it really is a market where it is growing exponentially, and it is has many new entrants all the time. So the focus on cyber is because we want to make sure Scotland and Scottish companies are able to benefit from that opportunity that comes with that growing market, and really try and get Scotland on the table and on the map place at the table and on the map when it comes to cyber security. So that's the cluster. So as we all know, this today is around 5G and 5G security. So I think calls like these, where we're bringing two communities together, we're bringing the cybersecurity community together and the 5G community together, and as we said at the start, this is the beginning of a whole series of events and webinars on that topic. So looking forward to a lot more, but I do think there are some really key benefits to bringing those two communities together from the start. And as Greg said, it is quite early days when it comes to 5G. 5G currently. Now, I know some companies on the call probably have been focusing both for a while, so we're not saying this is starting now, but what we're trying to do as part of these calls is just to widen that, to have companies who possibly haven't been focusing on cybersecurity today to start to think about it, and equally cybersecurity companies who maybe haven't thought about 5G to start to bring them into the community as well. And as I said, there's a couple of really key reasons why both sides can benefit from that. So the first is the whole secure by design. The earlier we start to have these conversations about security, the earlier we can make sure that we're building in those design principles from the start and having it throughout the architecture and the network. And very much, as Greg has said, is making sure it's at every layer and every stage of that network, that it's not, you're not assuming someone else has looked after a certain part of the security, that you're treating every bit as an insecure element, and where it makes sense to do so. So that's certainly one. The other is the innovation side. So 5G is a great enabler. There's a lot of opportunity and potential that comes with the 5G network. And like many tech companies and companies generally, there will be innovative products and services that come on the back of 5G. And so for cybersecurity companies, it's important that they're looking at that as an opportunity and as an area of where they can innovate. So whether it's greater use of AI, greater use of data, being able to collect more data so you can detect anomalies quicker, you can automate a lot more of the detection and the triage. So 5G may well be an enabler for that. So making sure cybersecurity companies are considering it, learning about 5G, and considering can that actually help their products and services is a key area as well. And then lastly is the risk. So Greg again touched on some of this. So it's not that 5G is inherently insecure or risky, but it's like with any new emerging technology, there is that learning curve we all have to go through. There's the updating of policies and principles in security, and just making sure that people aren't adding in things into the network without considering the risks associated with them, and really just making sure that we're, by focusing on security from the off, that we're really very aware and very focused on what risks may be introduced as this network emerged. And there are elements, there are numerous vendors, very software dependencies, probably have continuous software upgrades, complex supply chain, but nothing that we don't deal with today, and nothing that we can't bring our security principles and approaches to 5G and make sure that we're just deploying things in a secure fashion. So making sure we're bringing the people and the processes along with us on that journey. The other thing I just wanted to mention on this as well was I read an interesting article where it kind of was saying about how to get people to think about 5G in an innovative way, and to try and move away from the question of what is 5G, because if someone asks you what is 5G, it's very easy to start going on about speeds and reliability, and then people just think it's a network. But really what we want to start talking about is, what do you want to do? What do you and your business want to do? And can 5G be an enabler? So looking at the use cases and looking at the applications, and there's probably some products and services and applications that haven't even been thought about yet. And hopefully that's the case, because we want to see lots of innovation coming out of that. But really making sure people are thinking of this not as another fast network, but as an enabler that can help your business. It might not be the answer in all cases, but certainly thinking about it in that frame of mind means you're using the applications and the innovation, and then seeing if 5G can be that enabler. So Greg covered the triangle. I really just wanted to touch on one or two points. In terms of the IoT, IoT has been around for a while, we all know that, but really what we're expecting on the back of 5G is to see this kind of increase to a scale that just hasn't been seen before. And often there are some industries really using IoT in a big way, but for a lot of us, in our work environment, it's not something that we're using in earnest today. At home, certainly people have connected kettles and connected lights, etc. But we'll see it come more and more prolific and more normal in the corporate environment. And really, we need to make sure that people are not just putting in these devices without understanding and considering the risks. And very like what Greg said, we've got to make sure we treat everything as always been untrusted, And with IoT, what we do find sometimes it is plugged into the corporate network. So it's got to be properly segmented, properly controlled, updated, etc., etc. And so again, 5G isn't changing that. It's just going to be something that more and more companies are going to have to deal with and address. And the more we can kind of help that and help them get the security in there from the start, will only make things better, rather than trying to fix the problem after the ship's already sailed. On the ultra reliability side, you know, we will, and no latency, we will see applications and use cases that just haven't been considered in the past, or weren't possibly considered, but just weren't implemented because we didn't have some of the features that will come with 5G. So things like you know, automation of the oil and gas industry, the putting the electricity grids, you know, onto, you know, connecting them in a way they haven't been connected before. The whole self-driving cars, you know, that's obviously not normal at the moment. You know, it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. Along with 5G, but the risk with putting, you know, more and more critical infrastructure on this is that, you know, that has to have the extra layer of protection that, you know, we might not have needed in a lot of the applications so far. Again, it's got to have that segmentation and really be protected and separated from you know, public facing uses, for example. So not in any way saying we can't do it, but we've just got to make sure we apply the right security controls and assess the risk for each of the different use cases that we're adding to the 5G network. Right, I'm just going to keep rushing on because I think I'm probably over time. So we talked, so in terms of 5G, we see this really as being a competitive advantage for countries. So Paul gave us some stats about what kind of a benefit it is going to be for Scotland. You know, as long as we, you know, keep focusing on investing it and bring companies with us to get those innovations in place. There's a number of other countries around the world, South Korea, for example, in particular, putting a lot of money investment in there. But UK is seen as being a leader in the space as well, which is great. And Scotland obviously is going to play a big part in that. I just wanted to mention the UK 5G quickly, because if you haven't come across it before, it is a website that actually has quite a lot of useful material on there. And as does the Scottish 5G Centre, so both websites, very, very good sources of information. And they're UK 5G also running some webinars as well. So it's we're plugging in to get the wider view of what's happening in the UK as well. They've also just recently set up a security sub-working group, which Greg did mention. Myself and Greg are members of that. Greg, in fact, is the only academic member of that, so I think that's a great recognition of the expertise that's coming out of Scotland and University of Strathclyde in particular. The group has only been going roughly about a month. We were supposed to have our first group meeting on Tuesday, so I thought I would have lots of input for this call, but unfortunately it was moved to next week. So we haven't come together as a team yet, but ultimately what we're here for is to really just to make sure, you know, we're beating the drum in terms of security, that, you know, again, this type of webinar is exactly what we're supposed to do, that we're making sure when there's conversations about 5G, that security is kind of always has a place on the agenda. Well, we'll hopefully have more information coming from that as this group takes shape and as we get together on a more regular basis. I'm just about coming to the end of mine. So I wanted to talk about 5G create just quickly as well. Paul did touch on this. There's many projects underway. You know, the closing date is July, so some people might think, oh, that's a little bit late to start a project, but there's opportunities to join existing projects. Either reach out to the Scotland 5G Centre, for example, or you can go straight onto the UK 5G website, and there's a place where you can see what projects are looking for certain expertise and skills, or you can just submit your own you know, ask to say, I've got such skills, my company has such skills, and we'd like to join a project. So it's not too late to get involved if people are still interested in doing so. And so that is pretty much me. I just wanted to just wrap up by saying that, as I say, I think it's great when two communities come together, and hopefully this is something we're going to build on more and more. This is obviously just the kickoff call, really. And the real benefit to me is that whole secure by design, making sure we're bringing, you know, the existing standard security approaches, the whole defense in depth, as Greg mentioned, into 5G, and not like forgetting about that when we have this whole new emerging technology that everyone's getting very exciting about. You know, as we do see in other areas where people rush to deploy new technologies and kind of forget about security to the end, we really want to make sure that isn't what's happening, and can't happen for 5G. And then most excitingly, I guess, I'm hoping is that, you know, there will be some innovative products and services and applications coming out of this, and some well may be focused on the cybersecurity area, and unless that be our competitive advantage in Scotland, you know, it would be great if we were the leading forum, leading group on security for 5G. So that's certainly my hope. So on that note, I will pass you back to, sorry, let me stop sharing, pass you over to Keith.
Kira, I wonder if you could run my slides. I've just noticed I'm getting alerts across the top of my screen that would be inappropriate to show them as well.
Absolutely. Let me just do a quick.
It's not fatal if they're not there.
No, that's fine. Sorry, I did have them open. Here we go. Yes. Okay, let me just share my screen again now. And if you just keep saying next slide, if it's not obvious, and I'll just. Perfect. There you go.
Okay, so great. So when I get the final piece, and I'll be quick on this because it's really painting the strategic picture in which Scotland is operating. So security in the whole is reserved matter to the UK, but actually landing security messages and cybersecurity actually cuts across everything, including all devolved areas. So the Scottish Government, now 5 years ago, produced its strategic position through Safe, Secure and Prosperous, our cyber resilience strategy, specifically resilience because it's about our ability to respond and bounce back when things go wrong. And Kieran Martin from the NCSC continues to tell us it is if and when, and there's plenty of evidence that that's the case. So if we can sort of move on to the first slide. So we have the next slide, yeah. So quite an ambitious strategy, and we're in the sort of final year of that. But essentially, it's kind of broken down into essentially two pieces. The first three outcomes there are really about getting the basics right, so that citizens and businesses of all shapes and sizes actually understand and are prepared for the risks of living in a digital society, and therefore can embrace the benefits that we have. And particularly the confidence in the public services, the digital public services, because the public have almost no choice about moving to them. So they should have a good deal of trust that actually these services are resilient. And having built the basics, or assured ourselves that the basics are in place, the next kind of set of outcomes are really about how that's exploited, and that's that big ambition piece. Actually, Scotland becomes renowned and known for its research capability, and in actual fact, this is the great place to come and do business because we actually have something to offer. So that's that final bit. We create the conditions that make Scotland a good place to come for all the reasons we've said. You can have that trust, and we've got the academic and research capability and the businesses to show for it. So that's that ambition piece. And it's really important that we reflect on that in 5G, because in actual fact, their cyber risk is a business risk, and I think we accept that. But it comes in all shapes and forms. So cyber criminals, as we like to call them, are not one thing. You know, they're everything from opportunists to organised crime, and in this case, specifically, you know, industrial espionage and state nation. Everybody who can have a go can have a go. And I think it's really important that we understand, and Greg has touched on it, that it's no bad thing that we've started at a slightly slower pace, because we can learn, and we should learn from others who are venturing into this, because as we innovate, crime absolutely innovates at pace, and it will always look for the misuse case where we look for use cases. So it's really important, in actual fact, when we start to draw this out and create opportunities that come from it, that we actually look at the possibility of what could go wrong, and we factor that in as best we can. But we need to be able to monitor effectively, and then respond and recover and isolate where appropriate, because there is no doubt, as we think of the use cases, cyber crime, we'll be thinking of the misuse cases, and I think that's something that we should bake into our thinking. If we can move on, please. So that's our ambition, and we have unusually a national board, so that the Deputy First Minister has overall oversight of this, and he has from day one and retained it. So he's very interested and also concerned. I think he absolutely gets, you know, the the impact of a significant attack on Scotland, and he wants to be assured that we can respond and recover well. So it's great that we've got that lead. But we actually have a National Cyber Resilience Advisory Board that's made up of leaders from right across the public, private and third sector. And I think that's very useful that we have them to offer us some guidance and challenge in the delivery of the strategy. And as I say, we're coming to the end of the first 5 years, and we're now rethinking the next way forward. So they are very much a helpful oversight group, and they keep us grounded, which is great. So really, real collaboration, which is essential. So the National Cyber Resilience Advisory Board is a key tenet, and as we move forward and develop a new strategy, we can move on. So looking slightly back, there's been 5 pieces of work, and Kira's mentioned that the final piece, that last piece in the jigsaw that will go in there. And in Programme for Government, we committed to developing at pace 5 pieces of work that would allow us to achieve these outcomes, and you can see them on the screen. So really ensuring that we have the right level of learning and skills right across the pipeline of learning and education. And the 3 in the middle there is really all about getting the basics right in the public, private and third sector, focused on a lot of the work that the NCC is doing, ensuring that we are getting it right and we are prepared and able to respond. And that's the basics piece. So if we've got the basics piece, then the final piece, the economic opportunity, is something you can only really achieve if you have the rest in place. That therefore is the critical piece, that we can thrive because we are a nation who are prepared and are adequately informed and are making the appropriate risk-based decisions. And many of these pieces of work are coming to completion. Obviously, the economic opportunity is really only starting because we're at that stage. We can move on. And just to touch on them, so the skills learning plan is actually a huge plan. Education Scotland's Schools Development Scotland lead on this, and there are a bunch of actions really geared towards ensuring that from the first early stages in life right through to the latter stages and career pathways, that we have a significant and clear pathway of education and knowledge. So from preschool right through to higher education, and that's visible and understood. And it goes beyond that because it also deals with that a wider educational piece that we require to have. People need to have enough knowledge to understand the risk and then make the right decisions. So a large piece of work has been developed around about the learning and skills plan in Scotland, and we're doing some things in Scotland that have not been done elsewhere, which is great. So we can move on. So that's a plan. It's a presentation in its own right. The Public Sector Action Plan, well, it's interesting that we launched this, although it was already work and train, on the back of WannaCry. So there was a real requirement to that gave everywhere a bit of a shock, and the realisation, in actual fact, that that risk can come and blind you very quickly, because the cyber threat is not one that you see, feel, touch or smell. I mean, it is different. But it is real. So we needed assurance that the public sector, it's in there as our third outcome. We need to have confidence in digital public services. Therefore, we need to have confidence that our public sector are resilient. And there was a lot in place already, so it's not as if we're starting from scratch. But I think everybody would agree that cyber security didn't really have the prominence at a senior level as other business risks had. And there was a need to address that. So the action plan that did have some teeth really sought to get assurance across the 130 odd public sector organisations that they were taking cyber security risk seriously. They were making use of the free resources that existed and were being developed by the National Cybersecurity Centre. Why would you not? And we could demonstrate that in actual fact we were doing what we could against the most common internet-borne attacks, and that we were actually moving forward and we could respond adequately, so that incident response arrangements were appropriate. So that was a large piece of work that we've been undertaking over the last few years in the public sector. And attached to that, we also had Catalyst, if we can move on, a bunch of Catalyst organisations. So we took a representative sample, we brought them together as a group, and essentially we started to talk. We started to share and learn, and some themes bubbled up that we were then able to address, because an assumption that we all speak and share knowledge is just an assumption. So there were little stovepipes of good knowledge and learning, but in actual fact, when you opened up across the board, there were some really, really valuable lessons and common challenges there. And out of that came a couple of things, including the development of the public sector resilience framework, and that's a framework that tries to make sense of the plethora of different standards that are out there and simplify it so we can understand, where you are and how you can mature. And of course, the recently launched Scottish Cyber Assessment Service, which is a procurement tool which we have evolved to help organisations in the public sector consistently assess the risk to contracts. I'm sure that's dead exciting if you're into procurement. So that was the public sector, and if we move on, the other two pieces were really the private and third sector, slightly different to deal with because we had less teeth, to be fair, but it was the same principles of using our influence and our network of stakeholders to try and influence and understand what the levels of organisations were, and mindful of the fact that the Scottish community, business community, is heavily weighed towards SMEs, and they most definitely need support where they can get it, and it's trying to land some of that, and a lot of that is about amplification of the NCSE key messages and access to resources. But of course, that's a challenge in its own right, because businesses are just busy doing their business. And as I said, until they're actually touched with cyber attacks, it's quite problematic for them to really grasp a risk that they can't see, touch or smell. And again, with both these sectors, we created catalyst groups to help us understand and share the common knowledges. And in actual fact, we brought all three catalyst groups regularly together to share right across the sectors. So that's really about the basics, getting the basics in place. And if we can move on now, and that, as Kira said, that final piece that's really just started is now we have some confidence that we're started that journey, some confidence that Scotland is better informed, understands the business risk that cyber is, and that it will evolve at pace. We are reasonably confident that now is the time that we can actually start the journey of exploiting the economic opportunity that this obviously provides Scotland, as it provides everybody else. But why not here? Because quite a lot about Scotland lends itself well to being the kind of place, community that this opportunity could grow. So that's the strategic view, essentially, in a nutshell. And I don't think there's a slide after that other than the sort of closer one. Other than to say, we are now, it's the where now, so we're busy reviewing where we've been, what we've achieved, and looking at the landscape now, as are the UK, because the UK strategy is also under review, and we will be looking in 2021 to publish or refresh our plans and our strategy to make sure that it's fit for the next phase. And I think that's probably all I want to say, Kira.
Great, thanks, Kate. That's great. Okay, so I didn't want to look at questions while you were speaking in case I was in any way interrupting your screen. So let me just quickly jump on the questions now. So I'll just let you read them out as I see them. So you've got one from Dan Brown, who's from Farpoint. Are there any well-established standards for 5G security? I've seen plenty of white papers, but nothing by an independent standards body. So Greg, did you want to take that one?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, there are standards for 5G security. They are quite heavily embedded within the existing 3GPP standard suite, so to speak. So there's a lot of security throughout the design of the standards. The limitation of that, and the thing that's important that we've got to remember, is there are gaps in where the standard begins and ends and what is actually important to the overall security of a 5G network. So just as an example, say you're building a mobile network, just going and doing your deployment. The standards will cover the security for the air interface, that the handset speaking to the network. So, it will also cover, some aspects of the radio access network, but not all aspects of it. If, I've done this sort of thing in the past, if you have to go in and the network wants to find out how secure they are, one of the ways I'll generally get in is I'll get access in through a radio. There won't be enough network segmentation, and I'll get in through default passwords on switches or routers. Once I'm on there, I'll just work my way back up. So, that type of, sometimes it's not always the things that are in the standard, so to speak, but, definitely management plane, there are some security challenges there. And for the most part, the management control planes of the radios are themselves not the subject of standards. Typically, generally, that those parts are vendor specific, and that's where those opportunities kick in. In terms of established standards from another perspective of implementations, there's lots of good practice. There's lots of non-5G, not 5G specific. There are lots of good standards out there in terms of proper secure coding practice. Using fixed buffer lengths, fixed array lengths, not doing dynamic memory allocation, all these sorts of things that are good practice. The real challenge is going to come down to, do people implement them? Can you verify they implemented them? And did they actually implement them properly? Because fundamentally, if your password is the vendor name and then 123, you're not going to keep me out for long.
Yeah, no, thanks, Greg. There's another question that's very close to that, so I just wanted to raise it now in case there's anything else you wanted to add in that area. Apologies if I've got the name pronounced wrong, but Sai Long Kyo has asked, what are the gaps in terms of security between 4G and 5G?
So, I mean, in terms of gaps between 4G and 5G, I think we've got to remember 5G is an evolution of 4G. So after the kind of 2G, 3G transition, we said, right, no more, we're not doing these big jumps. We're going to have this as an evolving process, moving step by step by step. So what's happened between 4G and 5G is we've added a number of security features to the standards. So 5G has got some asymmetric authentication for the first time, rather than shared keys, etc. So we have added some new components there. From technical perspective, mostly what we're doing is closing the gap. So some parts of 4G we're certainly starting to, look a little bit long in the tooth. There were a few little sort of passive attacks around DNS traffic going through 4G networks. But I think the real difference is actually going to be outside of the technical standards when it comes to 5G, much more into how people are planning to use 5G right now. So if you go speak to, for example, a power system operator, they're probably looking at the idea of, well, I don't want to pay the capital and operational cost of running my own entire comms network unless I really have to. Could I use this, heralded 5G that I've just received 5 information packs with, shiny polished brochures? Can I use this to avoid my need for a dedicated network? And as you look towards decarbonisation and, all this kind of, the green energy priorities and drive, you're going to connect more and more important equipment. Many of these things will be critical national infrastructure that are, going to be governed by the NIS directive and other rules. You're going to have to connect these devices onto a network, and there will be more control. At the moment, we don't do remote control of these types of infrastructure. As we move forward, that will be controlled over networks. If it goes over a 5G network, suddenly there's a whole new threat around, the way that network works and what's connected to it. So I think that will be quite a key aspect there as well.
And I guess we're seeing more and more security features coming as each new release. We've got release 16, 17, all coming. So we'll see that evolve and mature over time. Is there also a bit of a risk then as well, Greg, that, because we're going to have for quite a while, we're going to have 4G integrated with 5G, that if people kind of are assuming the features that come with 5G are available, they might forget that actually you're still going to have traffic going over legacy networks that won't have that feature end to end. So it's that whole integration and kind of the whole legacy system bit that complicates this as well?
Yeah, the legacy system part is going to be a complicator, although I think it's important to remember that unless you actually lock your device to being 5G only in the future in order to gain advantages of that security, it is pretty straightforward to do a downgrade attack and knock, you know, say you've got, I've got my 5G phone somewhere here. There we go. I'll get it. There we go. There's a 5G phone, right? 5G phone. And that's also a 2G and a 3G and a 4G phone. Now, if I create a little tiny bit of interference, that will jump back to 4G from 5G if I had a signal. If I create another little bit of interference, it'll jump from 4G to 3G. If I can knock that phone to 3G, or even better would be 2G, the security of the interface is basically gone at that point. I can create a fake network and it'll jump straight on without authentication. So that type of backwards compatibility, that is going to always be there, unless you actually go in and forcibly configure the device to not do legacy fallback to 2G or 3G. Once you get back to that, you're going to have untold security problems for devices. But in terms of the way the networks, you know, interoperate at a kind of core level in terms of how they're working, I wouldn't be unduly concerned, but I think people do need to be aware of it, that the sales literature talking about the future of 5G will not be what they're going to experience today.
Gotcha. Just Paul or Keith, do you want to add anything to that? I know we have other questions, but just before we move on to other ones, anything to add to that particular topic? I think you're on mute, Keith, sorry.
Yeah, was that for me?
Either of you, either Paul or Keith, if either of you want to say something.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think, I mean, generally on this, there was a question sort of linked to this for me. I think, you know, from a centre's perspective, it's keen that the centre's there in the midst of it. It's listening to what those security concerns are that people may have, but also you know, we need to be responsible and ensure the projects that are out there looking at this are addressing some of those concerns. So we need to ensure we're lobbying the right people to make sure, you know, data concerns are addressed, and we present outcomes to the appropriate people or organisations. There was a question related to cabs, connected autonomous vehicles, around security concerns there, which I'll pick up now. And I think, you know, I accept, you know, it's kind of a new world, a new era as we step into that, and there will be concerns. But so it's about presenting the right information. You know, we see a lot of misinformation at the moment in this space, and it's about presenting results, outputs from results, trials and test beds, and then just present that information to the public. So the centre's there to listen to that, direct people to the right sources of information to educate and enhance their learnings. And where we feel things perhaps could be enhanced, we will lobby the appropriate organisations to do appropriate testing, etc. in that space.
Okay. Thanks, Paul. Sorry, Keith, were you hoping to come in there?
Yeah, I mean, just the same. This is about evolution. It is about managing risk once you understand the risk. And I think if you look at the evolution of the car, well, they never had seatbelts, and over time, you know, it evolves where there's proven risks that were never foreseen, and that'll be the same with this. And I think from government, both the UK and the Scottish government, they'll be looking to ensure that those that are in the know understand these risks, and that the appropriate you know, level of risk-taking decision-making is put in place, and governments will step in where they feel that they need to.
Great, thanks, Keith. And we have seen, you know, obviously government really get behind this as well. I mean, obviously between the Scottish 5G Centre, and security is one of the first areas of focusing on, but also with Census and the whole IoT Secure by Design challenge. So if anyone on the call hasn't, you know, connected in with Census in that area, and you are thinking of applications, you know, IoT related applications, that is certainly a good area to get involved with as well. And they'll be, you know, a key partner with Scotland 5G Centre, because, you know, IoT is a huge application that will benefit from 5G. So yes, it's definitely worth connecting into that area as well. That's great. I think we covered all questions. I know there was something from John Hills from Unisys, so we may have covered, but let me just read it out just quickly. So John's agreeing that we should focus on the zero trust concept, where we can't trust the wires that we communicate on. Does that not imply we need to secure the communication from the endpoints instead of securing the wires? Need to assume breach. So a major part of security is also a response plan. Anyone want to take that? I think that was more a comment rather than a question, but it's interesting topic certainly.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. If you do focus towards zero trust, you are reducing the trust on the wires, so to speak, which is a sensible thing to do. Yes, you need to secure the communications from the endpoints, but I think it's important to understand what you're trying to secure. So there's kind of three things you can mean when you say security. maybe 4 sometimes, right? You can be talking confidentiality. So someone sending a message to someone else and knowing that that text message won't be intercepted and won't be accessed by someone that shouldn't see it. So for example, you're receiving a passcode for your bank. You want to make sure that it's confidential and it gets there to you. Integrity is the second thing you want to look for. Now, again, we're just talking about end users' phones here. So integrity would be making sure that when the bank sends you a message to authenticate a transaction, nobody's gone in and changed the amount. So it says I'm approving a £1 transaction, not a £1,000 transaction. That's important there. Availability is then making sure that the system is up and robust and resilient and accessible to you when you need it, and you can connect and you don't get bounced off it and such. So yes, we secure the endpoints in order to deliver the confidentiality and the integrity, but in order to get the availability that we require, the resilience that we're going to need, it won't just be a case of securing the endpoint itself. We will have to look at other ways of going about security, and that's where the concern of someone gets into the radio and is able to turn that on and off, or is able to get access to things, slow things down, interfere with infrastructure, so on and so forth. So yeah, you are going to move towards the endpoints, and incident response plans are really important for this. I think a lot of it is going to also be about, yes, you need an incident response plan if you've already been breached, but also at the same time, it's about recognizing at the scale you are building a mobile network at, these types of attacks are happening. The threat actors are trying new things. These are very real threats, and to an extent, yes, you're going to need an IR plan, but you also need to be following and using it anyway, because it's already happened. So I guess with that, I think there's one more question on the Q&A here.
There's another one that came in. Just want to check if anyone else wants to jump in on that question. So Keith, were you looking to say something?
Yeah, just on Greg's point. So response plans are excellent when things go wrong, but I think particularly when the landscape completely changes, which it will with 5G, I think, and I don't know how this will be done, but it's the monitoring piece that I think becomes important also. So who has oversight of the right bits to know when something different's happening, and threats are being seen. So I think in its own right, we'd have to have quite a different attitude towards the ability to monitor what's going on across the network to identify and hone in on these risks. So definitely it's a challenge because most of this is done on understanding what normal is. When you're evolving a network, you don't really have normal. So I think that's an area of exploration. Very interested in.
Yeah, no, I agree, Pete. And I guess it's really come back to the fact that, you're right, it's evolving, the network's evolving, the people's understanding's evolving, we get new releases all the time out, which again, make changes to the features, capabilities. But as long as we're trying to apply standard principles and approaches to security, the whole defense in depth, etc., as best we can at each stage, and get the whole secure by design, so people are thinking about it when they're developing, designing applications and start, it's going to put us in a good position. It might not be, it might be something that has to evolve and mature itself over time, but it certainly will give us in a very, very strong position, as opposed to, in the past where we've seen some other technologies, I guess, be accelerated and launched quite quickly, and only afterwards did they think, what are the security risks now? What are the the use cases that the criminals are fastly considering that we haven't considered as a user community? But yeah, no, all good points.
Never more so have we needed DevOps and security ops coming together. I mean, I think this is the place where they must be hand in hand in this area, and if we get that piece right, then we just lower the risks right from the get-go.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is another question, you're right. So it's around 6G, which certainly I won't be answering this question. So it says, some critics say that 5G is lacking application buy-in to match OpEx or upfront investment, and why not wait for 6G where CapEx and OpEx match? May I know your view? I know that was a concern you raised, Paul, in terms of trying to get that return on investment and making sure there's a commercial benefit, especially for some of the rural communities where that's always been a challenge, is not quite enough clustering of people and businesses to sometimes justify some of the spend. I'm hoping 5G can fix that. Is that something you've even looked at yet, the whole 6G arena?
No, I mean, I'd be interested. I'm not sure where what's been delivered yet through 6G that overcomes this hurdle, where capex and opex match. So yeah, I'm not aware of that at the moment. But certainly, if you look at the fundamentals, you need power. You generally need some sort of backhaul. So whether it's 4G, 5G, 6G, those still exist. I guess what I'm keen to look at is we overcome some of those connectivity challenges today, and some of our projects are looking at that. And in addition, private networks, I think I'm keen that we look at deploying private wireless networks in these kind of rural communities as well. So that can reduce the OPEX to a degree in some of these instances as well, and work with the communities about use cases and look at how they can augment a different revenue into that to look at different innovative use cases. But specific to use cases, I don't know. I'd be interested to know why that may be easier. I think as a centre and generally the industry, the M&O business case has failed. So I think now is the time to look at a toolkit of solutions to address this shortfall.
Yeah, thanks, Paul.
I'll throw something on that. I think 6G is early days yet, right? We don't know what 6G is going to be, although we can make a few very, very, very accurate predictions. We know that a G comes along every 10 years because we need an excuse to drive handset renewal cycles. So we'll see a G. 6G will launch in 2028. Will be its kind of starting point. So 8 years to go now. But you'll note that we've not really got 5G properly rolled out, and we're talking about 6G. In the meantime, we'll see 5G plus, which will be, the sort of, well, actually, we probably shouldn't have called it 5G, which is what always happens when we realize that we've made a mistake with our naming. But in terms of 6G, I think it's important that we kind of balance our expectations in terms of what is going to be achievable here. So to run a full nationwide infrastructure rollout of equipment across an entire country, that is incredibly expensive. I don't know that the appetite is going to be there when it comes to 6G in order to actually do that type of thing. If you look at the business model that's going, and the changes that are happening in the mobile operators just now, we're going through a period of capital asset divestment, which means we're actually taking our stakes in tower companies, and those are actually being sold off onto the market. And this is not looking like a market that's going to be continuing to sustain very high levels of upfront capital investment. So I think what we're going to see is 6G will not be, 6G will exist because we need a G in 10 years' time, but it will not really be a massive investment of huge amounts of equipment like we would traditionally have seen. 5G is going to be a challenge enough actually getting this equipment out into the field to deliver what people think of as 5G in terms of speeds, in terms of latency. You are going to be looking at C-band, so kind of 3.5 gigahertz frequencies, and the coverage range from those is just so much lower, and the density of cells is so much higher that the capital to lay out that network is huge. And if that were to happen nationwide, and I don't think it will, I think it's quite clear right now that 5G will not be delivered in the same way 4G, 3G, 2G were in the kind of, several hundred megahertz way. I think we'll see a sort of hybrid 4G, 5G in the 700 megahertz band filling the gap. But for the ultra high speeds and for the ultra capable 5G services, I think to look for a capex opex match, well, you can't really go for a huge massive capex rollout of 6G. It'll likely be a sort of piggyback software update onto 5G. At that point, it'll now become a case of the business model, and I think that's a really interesting area for a broader discussion. Is what is the business model of connecting more devices to the internet? Because the idea of charging £5 a month for a SIM card, it just simply doesn't work for a whole load of use cases that can be really important and have real potential, like agriculture. Typical farmer is probably taking home 16k a year after they've paid all their outlays out. That's not someone that's going to be paying £5 a month per cow for a SIM card.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Greg. So we have had a couple of other questions come in, and we've had the NIST white paper link there, so that's great. Everybody can kind of download that if they haven't come across that before. So thank you, Sai. So we have another one from Sashaya Pankanta. Apologies again if I'm not getting the name pronounced right. Thanks. So thanks for a very useful presentation. Very welcome. That you might not be referring to mine, but I'll take a thank you anyway. One of the key elements is container security, where networks become infrastructure as a code. There appears to be a requirement for dynamic SOAR security orchestration and automation SOAR across several slices using multiple networks. Will there be some high-level monitoring, kind of cyber observatory, to report to Intel on major attacks on critical infrastructure? So I guess somehow connecting that into the whole CISP environment as well, and making sure, as you say, we're monitoring the 5G networks as well. Keith, is that something you've had any conversations on in terms of that extra level of intel on critical infrastructure at this stage, or is it just too early doors?
Yeah, sorry. Personally, we've not had any of these kind of conversations. Not to say that kind of thing's not been going on, at another level.
Yeah, I mean, we know DCMS and NCSC and UK government generally are very, very plugged into this as well. As you say, everyone's kind of keeping a watching brief as we see how it all evolves, and getting properly connected into the projects and the plans, which is really what's needed at this point. So, Greg or Paul, anything to add to that question?
Yeah, I think it's good to point that out. So infrastructure as code and the sort of containerization way of working. This is if we look at the IT versus telecoms world split, this is firmly on the IT side of things, and these are threats much broader than 5G networks. But as we move to 5G with kind of NFV, network function virtualization, we're now seeing the 5G networks running as virtual machine components of a VM, a stack of VMs, or containers running within those. And yes, you're going to need this type of monitoring, but actually this is something that's been needed for quite some time. So looking at the actual kind of underlying, I guess it's the critical infrastructure of the digital world. So what would that be? That is Linux, that is IP tables, that is going to be Docker or a container runtime, that is going to be your kind of routing platforms, your service discovery layers, and all the other components like that. Some will be implementation specific, but actually see for things like Linux, it will be generic, and it will be something that we can start to bring together. I think that firmly at the moment comes under NCSC's purview, and their remit would be to be, keeping a watching brief over these things. Generally, because these projects are actually developed in quite a decentralized way, it is going to come down to a case of, keep your own watching brief, because you're going to find out at the same time NCSC does, unless we've got specific intelligence as to an actively exploited non-public threat that's taking place. But on the whole, yeah, a kind of observatory is a good thing. Whether it would actually achieve what would be needed, and whether it would give you the outcome that each individual stakeholder would need, to be a wee bit harder to say. You can monitor your network logs, you can look at what's happening, but actually a lot of the time, I think, the initiatives and, kind of creating a thing, so to speak, might not actually achieve what the individual stakeholders need, which is their own tailored, targeted, having people looking at it themselves and figuring out what's happening and keeping on top of things. But patching and all that sort of stuff, especially as you get these deeper container stacks, people really do need to start to think about, how am I going to patch my containers? Am I keeping up to date? How am I going to handle when the support ends on this Linux distribution and I have to move to the next one? What happens when my container runtime needs updated? All these sorts of questions. So really good thing to be thinking about.
Yeah, so I think we're just around out of time. So thank you for all those questions. That's always a good sign of a webinar where there's lots and lots of questions come in. It's a really interesting talk on the back of that. So Paul, I'm going to hand back to you just for a final statement, if that's okay, and then I'll just close the call. I just want to quickly mention the survey before we wrap up. So is that okay to hand back to you, Paul?
Yeah, no, that's fine. So yeah, thanks for everyone's participation, and hopefully this was our first live webinar, and I think we're going to be planning more of these, and we've got several Connect work streams that we'll be launching in the coming weeks as well. So watch this space for more to come. But and what we're going to do, this is a security theme. I think we're going to return to this at regular intervals, probably every quarter or something like that as well. So we can hopefully create some momentum and interesting progression on such topics. So again, if you've got any ideas, please fire them in your feedback, and we can look to address them. But yeah, thanks for your engagement and participation, and look forward to virtually sharing with you again soon.
Great, thanks, Paul. Yeah, no, I just want to say the survey that's come out is a generic ScotlandIS survey, but in particular for this webinar, we're keen to know what topics you'd like covered in regards to 5G and 5G security, and then we'll make sure we feed all that back into the Scotland 5G Centre and help to, to work on the next series of webinars. So we are just about up for time. I know a lot of people will be rushing on to their 11 o'clock call, which is one of the disadvantages of us all working from home, that it's back-to-back conference calls. So I will give you all a couple of minutes back to grab a quick coffee. And yeah, as what Paul said, thank you very much for your time today. Thanks to all the speakers as well. I felt I learned lots myself. So I appreciate your time, and just reach out if anyone has any questions. Just reach out to any of the speakers, and we're happy to get in touch and to help connect you into the Scotland 5G security community that we're now building. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye.